Yo, yo, it's time to discover the flow. Shout out to the bros. You know, I like to welcome everybody to discover the flow. No matter how you discover the show or discover the bros, now you about to see how far we can go, because it's time for discover the flow. Yeah, cowabunga do. You know live is how we come to you. Turn the levels up when you hear the boys coming through. The pod squad giving you just what you need, hitting you with a new special guest every week. Don't you dare hit skip, man, it's Tristan and Kip. DTF pod about to take you on a trip. Mega Ran bring the heat, yeah. But be clear, I wasn't even supposed to be here. Welcome to Discover the Flow. No matter how you discovered the show or discovered the bros, now you about to see how far we can go, because it's time for Discover the Flow. Let's start the show.
Hey, how about you guys?
I can't complain.
Not bad, not bad. I know. You said earlier you had a bit of a brain fart or something, about the time.
Yeah, I calculated backwards. Like, I should know how to do time, particularly with Central. That's where
right.
my wife is from the Chicago area, so, and we lived in Wisconsin for several years, so I know how Central Time works.
Did she live in Chicago or one of the surrounding suburbs?
In one of the suburbs around Lake Zurich.
Okay.
Oh, okay. We're specifically in Naperville.
Okay.
So yeah. So first question to kick this off, just so that we can be on the same page for the whole thing. I hear Genghis, I hear Genghis, I hear Chinggis. What is the proper pronunciation?
It's Chinggis, damn it.
And there's the tagline to open the episode. It's Chinggis, damn it.
There we go.
All right, so we're all in agreement. We're saying Chinggis Khan today.
There you go. And if you really want to know why it's that way, I can tell you.
Sure.
Absolutely. That's what we're here for.
We're here to learn.
Well, for instance, if you fly into Mongolia, where Chinggis Khan is from, you're going to fly into the Chinggis Khan airport. You're probably going to drive down the Chinggis Khan Avenue. You might change your money at the
Uh-oh. That's not good.
That's not good. That's what happens when you use the G word. Do not say the G word. Bad things will happen. John Wayne died of cancer from saying the G word.
From being the only white guy to play Chinggis Khan. That's his
exactly fault. A lot of people died from cancer in that movie. Some say it was because they were near a atomic bomb testing site, but I think it was because they used the G word. All the evidence suggests that. Everyone I know who, most people who've used the G word have died.
Oof, that's not good.
Tristan, you're muted.
Yeah,
there you go.
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Yeah. So Chinggis is, we actually have evidence that the title of his name is Chinggis Khan. It means like firm or resolute ruler. Some people think it means oceanic. Basically, it's, saying how powerful he is. But as you go across Asia and people are trying to figure out who this guy is, there are certain languages that don't have a ch sound, like Arabic. And they use another letter that would be, the phoneme would be like Genghis, or a soft J or G, Genghis. But in like Egypt, that sound is a hard G, so the G word. And then when in the time of Louis XIV, the Sun King, you get a French scholar, Petit Delacroix, who writes a biography of Chinggis Khan, and he titles it Genghis Khan. So in French, Genghis Khan. This book gets translated in English. It's a bestseller. Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin love it. They're giving out copies to it. Thomas Jefferson will donate a copy to the Library of Congress. But of course, Americans, they like their G's to be hard. and the rest, as they say, is history. So we're stuck with a mispronunciation.
It's better a hard G than a hard R. So, uh,
Wow.
where,
Hope you're prepared for this, sir. I really do hope you're prepared.
we want to learn,
I am.
but we want to have fun with it at the same time. So, but no, where did your love for this topic really come from? You know, because it's an interesting thing to take up at such a young age.
Yeah, I read a book in 5th grade. I was in the school library one day and I found this biography of Genghis Khan by Harold Lamb. Harold Lamb was this guy in the 30s who wrote a lot of biographies about like Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan and historical figures like that. And it just captured my imagination in a way that nothing else did. And it kind of hung around in the back of my mind. And when I was in college, I read another book about the Mongols, and everything just kind of clicked. And then it became my profession over time. So after that point, I was a Mongolist, you could say.
So going back to the name real quick, Genghis Khan is a title, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not his actual name. It's just it became his name.
It became his name, but it's
association.
It's a title. His real name was Temujin.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that because that's what I thought I had heard. So I just want to make sure.
Yeah, but it's okay to call him Genghis Khan. And that's what everyone called him.
I found that out. When I found that out, I was a little surprised. I was like, oh, I didn't know that wasn't like his name, you know? I didn't know it was something you could ascend to.
Yeah, particularly because Khan is a fairly common last name in certain parts of the world, and it actually comes from the title of Khan. So it's one of those things that is kind of morphed over time from being just a title to also a name. So I can certainly understand why. And I'm pretty sure that I thought it was his name when I first heard of him too, when I was in 5th grade or whenever I first heard of him. So
when they're teaching you in elementary school, they don't say this guy named Temujin who killed his brother and became the king.
Yeah,
they don't tell you that. They just say this is Genghis Khan. It's not what they say.
But you guys seem to know more than you guys seem to know a little bit more than the average bear. I mean, that he killed his brother.
Yeah,
we do our research and it's something we've both been interested in our whole lives.
Cool.
We both watch the History Channel to a fault sometimes. So,
not to mention when you're a kid and you're in school, when we all thought it was Genghis Khan, that was kind of cool to say. It sounded cool. That's why you remember stuff about it. You know what I mean? I don't think we would have remembered much if they were Temujin,
But that and watching Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure till the tape broke, kind of.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a horrible representation
character based off of him too.
Yeah, I really don't think he would have gone for the Twinkies. Now, if it was a 6-pack of beer or something like that, maybe, but not the Twinkies.
So in the post-apocalyptic world, we leave the beer to Genghis Khan and the Twinkies for Woody Harrelson. All right, we got that one covered.
That works.
Okay.
So what would be one of the biggest misconceptions people have had over time about Genghis Khan besides the proper pronunciation of his name?
That I think one of the biggest misperceptions of him is that he wanted to conquer the world. That's an idea that gets thrown around, and if his successors basically encouraged this idea that the Mongols were supposed to conquer the world and heaven had bequeathed the earth to Genghis Khan and his descendants. But if you actually look at what Genghis Khan did, he's not trying to conquer the world. Most of the wars he gets involved in are to stabilize his kingdom. He's united Mongolia, and there are some people who fled who would be rivals, and he's hunting them down. And then he also makes a couple of invasions to prevent stronger powers from meddling in the steppe, like the Jin Empire, which was the most powerful state in the world at that time, before the Mongols. And that was like in northern China, Manchuria, what is now Inner Mongolia. And then also the war in Central Asia against the Khwarezmian Empire, which is the most powerful empire you've never heard of. And the reason you never heard of it is because Genghis Khan is going to wipe it off the map. But that one started off of a trade dispute. Genghis Khan wanted to have peaceful relations. The Sultan of the Khwarezmian Empire, basically what is now Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and Iran, much of Iran, massacred the caravan and confiscated all the stuff. And well, Genghis Khan didn't take too kindly to that. And so we have a war that ends up wiping this empire off the map. And it's also where you get the great speech where he goes into a mosque and says, "I am the punishment of God. If not for the sins of your leaders, God would not have sent a punishment like me." That's good drama.
That's a hell of a speech.
Yeah, he probably never said it, but you know, people put it in his mouth, and it sounds really good. It sounds convincing.
I mean, most of the things people say.
Interesting coming from a character like Genghis Khan, but yeah, interesting if it was coming from Genghis Khan. Terrifying if it was a modern day politician.
Now remember, if Tristan just like keels over, and
I'm 100%
G word.
I'm 100% expecting him to die within the next 10 minutes.
I'm trying. It's a lifetime of one thing, you know, and then having
I get it.
Change on me.
So, as far as Genghis Khan is concerned, what would you consider his most savage or brutal tactic that he's used over time? I know there's a lot of stories about him just rolling over people and things like that, but he was brutal. Like he's the Mongols are known for horse combat. Like they were known for riding in and, you know, shock troop type behaviors.
Oh yeah. I think really, if you rebelled against him, you could expect no mercy. You had one shot. And like there was a rebellion among a group of people called the Hoyan Irgun. Basically, these are groups in Siberia right above Mongolia. And they rebelled because Genghis Khan had a governor who got his job because he had a prophecy that Genghis Khan would become the leader of the people. And he said, if this comes true, you got to reward me. And it came true. So he rewarded him. And he said, well, what do you want? And he said, I want to be Lord of the people. I want to take as many wives as I want. And Genghis Khan said, done. You did me a solid. You prophesied that I'd become the leader. So you get what you want. Well, what Genghis Khan didn't think through is this whole part about having as many wives as you want. And because this guy whose name was Horchi, he got his wives by basically taking whomever he wanted. And for some reason, people don't like that when you just go up and say, you know, your daughter or your wife, she's mine now. So he collected a bunch of them. People rebelled, and they tried to resolve it diplomatically, but then they took the diplomat as hostage. And so Genghis Khan had troops go up and deal with it. They squashed it. So the governor who started the whole thing, he got to keep his job. And I think all of his wives too, as punishment for the rebels for basically rebelling against him. So it's one of those things that if it had been resolved diplomatically, it would have worked out well. But, you know, or you know, another brutal thing is, again, the Khwarezmian Empire. They took stuff from Genghis Khan, and he invaded the empire and destroyed that empire pretty quickly and savagely. I mean, when he goes into Bukhara, where he goes there specifically because that's where they're keeping all of his stuff. And the invasion is so bad that people in the Muslim sources, they describe it like, it's the end of the world. And there's one guy, Ibn al-Athir, who writes, even the Antichrist is better than these Mongols, because the Antichrist will at least spare his followers. The Mongols will spare no one. So, he's probably exaggerating a little bit, maybe just a wee bit, but it still gives you a sense of just how scary the Mongol invasion was. They did not hold back.
One of the things that I found interesting that I read is that the Mongols would sit outside the town of one of their enemies and just wait them out. They have their supplies with them. They have their food with them. Basically, they cut off the supply chain and just sit there like, okay, let's see who can last longer.
That happened a lot of times because initially the Mongols weren't very good at siege warfare. They learned really quickly and became quite adept at it. But initially they weren't very good at it. And there was a city that they attacked. It was the Kingdom of Shisha, which is now in what is now Ningxia and Gansu province of China. And they couldn't take it. So they decided to build a dam and flood a river into the city. Well, at that time, there was no MIT, Mongol Institute of Technology. And they flooded the city, but they almost drowned themselves as well because they flooded their own camp. And the ruler of the city decided, we're going to surrender because these guys are just crazy enough to do something even worse. So
that's a bit wild.
They became quite good at waiting people out, cutting off their supplies because they had the mobility. And usually if you sent out an army against them, that army would lose and not come back home.
You talk about their mobility. Why were they so good on horseback?
That was their lifestyle. They were pastoral nomads. They didn't really ever live in cities. Contrary to popular belief, there were cities among the nomads, trading points, and sometimes a ruler would set up a permanent location because it makes it easier to find you if you're the ruler. And the Mongols would build a city, Karakorum, later on. But their whole life is dependent on herding animals, sheep, horses, cattle or yaks, goats, camels. And so you're living most of your life in a saddle. And, it's sometimes said that the Mongols would only get off their horses for three things. Number one, number two, and you can probably figure out number three. But I have a friend who always wanted to write a book called Doing It on Horseback, talking about the creation of the Mongol Empire, but he also had, other references as well. So
makes perfect sense.
But
doing it on horseback and taking multiple wives, these all sound like terrible things. Like these aren't the ideas of an intelligent, warlord.
Well, a lot of the wives were alliances, marriage alliances.
I don't care. I had one wife and I was miserable. Notice I said had. So
well, Genghis Khan may have chose wisely.
Possibly. Had to.
Possibly.
Their marriages were a little different too. So
yeah, and of course, if he didn't like one wife, he would go to the other wife, and when he went on campaign, he always took one of the younger wives with him.
You mean he wasn't lopping off their heads or making them disappear like Henry III?
No, Henry VIII.
Oh, eighth. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Not sure Henry
I get my Church of England facts. Yeah, sometimes I get my Church of England facts messed up. My bad.
That's all right.
But he took over relatively what I had read over 12 million square miles of the earth. You say it's a misconception that they were trying to take over the world, but what finally stopped them?
Well, it's a misconception that Genghis Khan wanted to conquer the world. after he died, they kind of looked around and saw how much territory they had conquered and everything that they went, they went from basically being a small minor power on the steppes of Mongolia to, this amazing, powerful kingdom or empire. And they rationalized it by, the blue eternal sky has bequeathed the world to us and we should rule it. And if you don't accept our rule, then you're rebelling against the will of heaven. And we have to destroy you. No hard feelings, but we have to do what we have to do. And so his successors would promote this idea that the Mongols are supposed to rule the world. And they do go on to establish an empire, the largest contiguous empire in history. And, the only thing larger was the British Empire. But, they included vast tracts of Canada and Australia that, okay, congratulations, you're ruling over kangaroos. Good job.
So the 12 million, so the 12 million square mile measurement, is that the entirety of the Mongol Empire, or is that just what Chinggis Khan was able to do?
That's the empire at its height.
Okay.
It's somewhere between 12 and 14 million. It's one of those things that, you play around with lines on map and the lines shift every year. So
12 million square miles seemed like an awful lot for 21 years because he really only
what he conquered himself was the most territory conquered by any single person.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact measurement of that, but it's still freaking big.
It's a lot of work for 21 years.
Tell me if these things are true.
Okay.
In doing research for this, I read that Chinggis Khan had a bit of a compassionate side to him.
Yeah.
Not only did he abolish torture, but he brought more. What's the word I'm looking for? Well, he abolished torture. He really pushed for protection of religious diversity and respect for women. Like he advanced the rights of women in the Mongol society. Are these all things that he really did?
I would say it's a bit exaggerated as far as abolishing torture. Okay, so remember when I told you that the Khwarezmian Empire, they massacred the caravan and then they took all the stuff from it? Well, when they caught the governor of the city that did that, who was the main instrument of it, the Mongols had a bit of whimsy to them because they captured them and said, "Oh, you stole our stuff. You're a very greedy person. We'll help you out." So they poured molten silver down all of his orifices.
Ooh.
So torture.
Yeah,
for a little
yeah,
bit.
I would say that classifies.
Yeah.
And
there's plenty of examples of the Mongols torturing people later on. So
that's expensive torture too. Jesus.
Well, then you can keep it later. You
cut
them open, you get it back. Recycling. They were very green.
Don't even worry about cutting them open. Just pull it all back out.
There you
he's
go.
already dead. Doesn't matter.
He won't miss it. So I would say that's exaggerated. It's their punishments were quite different from some of the other societies. In many ways, their punishments were their typical punishments, I should say, were less harsh than many of the so-called civilized countries around them. The Mongols are going to be seen as the barbarians because they're not living in cities, they're not farming. So in that respect, they're always considered more cruel and evil and whatnot. But really, they're no different from any other civilization of the age. The rights of women. That one's a little bit trickier because in comparison to, again, the civilizations, the sedentary cultures around them, definitely, Mongol women had a lot of rights. It doesn't matter what source you're reading, whether it's the Chinese sources or the Islamic sources or Christian sources. When they see Mongol women ruling, leading people around, basically in charge of stuff, they're kind of in shock. and they don't know what to do with it, because that's not what's happening in other societies. I mean, in medieval Europe, yes, you occasionally have a woman ruler, or you have some very influential women, but a lot of it's behind the scenes. But in the Mongol court, you'd have the queens there. You have several very powerful women who are ruling the empire directly. And many of them get a bad rap, but you also have to look at where the information is coming from. And often it's coming from sources very hostile to them because they were women, or they were from a different branch of Mongol society, basically, shall we say, rival parties or something along those lines. But medieval Mongol women had, particularly the elites, I mean, and you always have to look at the difference between the rich and the poor, but the elites, they had a lot of rights, had a lot of influence, a lot of power. So pretty good deal. And also just a nomadic society. There was more equal status between men and women, because out on the steppe, if there is a separation of labor, but if the husband is sick, or he breaks a leg because he gets thrown from a horse or something like that, the wife still has to deal with the animals, and vice versa. The husband will have to take over her work if she gets sick or whatever. So you learn how to do the same job. It's not considered necessarily, this is only for women to do. There's a preference, but there is a certain amount of egalitarian status. Not complete. It's definitely not 100% or anything. And what was the third category?
The third category was talking about his religious tolerance.
Okay, the religious tolerance. Usually that's greatly exaggerated. It's more like religious indifference. The Mongols are interested in religion, but their basic policy is you practice your religion and don't bother other people. And also your religious leaders should say prayers for the Khan and blah, blah, blah. But really, as long as you don't cause trouble, we're good with it. Now, certain groups got a lot of privileges, like Buddhists, Confucians, Muslims, Christian groups got a lot of privileges. Jews, Zoroastrians, and some other smaller religions that didn't have any political influence in the societies that they were in, they didn't get as many perks. They weren't persecuted, but they didn't get the tax advantages that the clergy would have in those other religions. And we see, Mongol queens sponsoring the building of churches and mosques and things like that. And in parts of Central Asia, when the Mongols came in, they were seen as liberators because this group believed that this other religious group was oppressing them and so forth. And really, it's just that the Mongols said, okay, play nice, don't persecute each other. And the reason for that is because they don't want people fighting. And they just want people to pay their taxes and behave themselves.
So I got a question that has been lingering in my brain since the beginning of my research for this. They say around 0.5% of men alive, or roughly 16 million people, are estimated to carry a chromosome linked in their lineage to Genghis Khan. But when I started looking stuff up, it said he had 5 kids, he had 15 kids, and some places it said he had up to 1,000 kids. What's the truth if you've been able to sort that out at all?
Yeah, that I was in grad school when that report first came out, and
yeah,
it's been a bit of a headache ever since then. Yeah, he had 4 sons from his first wife, his primary wife, and then he had some other sons from other wives. We don't know the exact number of sons he had, but like one of his sons had allegedly 44 sons. And in one source, he has 44
His son
sons.
was getting more busy than he was. Damn.
Well, it gets very cold in the winters in Mongolia and out on the steppes of Kazakhstan. So you got to do something. So, if you count all of the sons of the sons and whatnot, then yeah, you might somehow end up with that. And let's not forget about the concubines. He also had a bunch of concubines, and all of his sons had a bunch of concubines as well as wives and things like that. So it could be, but the problem is they're not really sure about that DNA. Who's it actually from? So it could be from Chinggis Khan or one of his relatives, one of his sons or maybe one of his brothers. But,
so if it's true, it's less. If it's true, it's less from him getting down and more of his sons getting busy.
Well, yeah, I mean, they all have to get busy in order for those genes to spread. So,
yeah, and again, like you said, it's cold and there ain't much more to do.
No, and that it's a report that really gets it's interesting because everyone always asks about that, and yeah. I've known people who've sent off their DNA and say, "Oh yes, it shows that I'm related to Chinggis Khan," and it's like, okay, buddy. Maybe you
don't have. It's funny because
if we don't have actual,
I love the idea
DNA.
of 23andMe coming back saying that.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, is there confirmed DNA that they can say is actually Chinggis Khan, or is it just
not yet?
Okay, so nobody knows where he was buried. Nobody like.
Well, I'm pretty sure that the Mongolian government does know where he's buried. And
why is that such a guarded secret? Like the Grail or anything like that,
Stops grave robbers.
And that would be a real primary interest there. There have been people who've tried to find it. In fact, there was a guy from Chicago who spent a lot of money looking for his tomb. And even got a very good scholar from the University of Chicago involved, and Professor John Woods, who's now retired, great scholar. He went primarily because he said, because I remember talking to him in his office about this when I was thinking about transferring to the University of Chicago from Wisconsin when I was a graduate student. And he said, well, they're going to find something. So I feel like I need to be there in case they do find something useful and interesting. Because the guy who was involved, Maury Kravitz, I believe his name was, he was a stockbroker in Chicago. I don't know why he thought he knew where the location of Chinggis Khan's tomb was. He said he had found it in a source, but all of us who actually, spent years and years and years reading these sources and stuff, like, I kind of doubt it. But, he went, and our idea, I've never got anyone in the Mongolian government who I know who've worked for the Mongolian government to give me a straight answer on this, but I'm pretty sure what they said is like, oh yeah, we think it's over there. Meanwhile, it's in the other direction. And what they basically did was have this guy find some other archaeological sites. Meanwhile, they're, sending him on a wild goose chase away from the tomb. Because, you got to think about it. Chinggis Khan is the founding father of Mongolia. Mongolia would not exist without Chinggis Khan. He's kind of the equivalent to George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and Jesus all wrapped up into one. And Mongolia is a strongly Buddhist country, and Chinggis Khan becomes a deity. He's a demigod, essentially. So you don't want to go digging up your gods.
That brings me to another question. Why was his birth considered divine?
If you go back in the family tree of Chinggis Khan, ultimately you get a woman named Alangoa, Alan the Beautiful, basically. And she marries this guy, and they have a few sons, 2 sons. Wait, I gotta count. two sons. And then he dies, the husband dies, and she gets pregnant again. And the sons start thinking, is she sleeping around with a slave? And she says, no, you idiots. A golden dog comes into my tent at night and rubbed my belly. And no, a golden light came into the tent, rubbed my belly, and then exited the smoke hole as a yellow dog. It was a dog, all right.
I apologize for my language, but man, hoes will say anything to get away with it.
Hey,
yeah, but
anything.
What's great about it is it's very similar to a lot of stories.
I said Chinggis.
Your feed keeps
doing better.
freezing up on us a little bit. So
Yeah, well, yesterday our internet wasn't even working, so hopefully everything's going to stay stable.
Yeah, well, and hopefully it's recording, so we can still
so.
get what you're saying while it freezes.
Yeah, but that whole story of Alan Goa and the Heavenly Sons, it's very similar to some things in Greek mythology where you have Zeus impregnating women, one way or the other,
light.
Shaft of light, things like that. So I always find that interesting, but yeah, I'm kind of with you on her sons just looking at her like, oh, mother.
Come on, Mom.
We know you need to get yourself off, but come on.
So the whole idea of these sons are from from heaven, and Chinggis Khan's great grandfather was one of these heavenly sons. So that's where that comes from. And also there's another thing about his birth. He was born allegedly with a blood clot clenched in his hand, which was seen as an auspicious sign of some sort. And people will take that in a different way, like, oh, he was going to be a bloody ruler or something like that.
Or he killed something in the womb,
Yeah.
Some pretty amazing foresight. What do they mean when they say that he believed in the power of the mountains? Like he thought the mountains had spirits in them?
Yeah. Yeah. The mountains would have a spirit in it. In the primal, shall we say, religion of Mongolia, or the belief system, we often call it shamanism, but shamanism really isn't a religion. A shaman is really a guy more like a psychiatrist. Someone who can communicate with the spirits, because the spirits interact with the mundane world. In this belief system, it's not a transcendental afterlife where everything's better. If you are, if you're a podcaster in this world, in the spirit world, you're going to be a podcaster there. Maybe you'll be, communicating with other people. If you are the guy who picks up the cow dung for the fires in this world, guess what your eternity is going to be like in the next world? You're going to be picking cow dung.
I think you need to talk to this guy named Daniel Jackson, because he would just completely tell you.
Don't do that.
But if you're the
Khan,
Khan,
a gentleman recently who told us he was the light and could tell you just everything about your past lives.
It was an interesting interview.
So is he the light that also impregnated Alan Goa?
It's very
he
possible.
Might be. He was a bit of a dog. And there's another one.
Well done, sir. But if you're the Khan, you're going to be, very spiritually powerful. And so, when Chinggis Khan dies, he basically becomes a demigod because he's so powerful, and people will pray to him. But, there's also, in addition to the human spirits in that world, there's also the mountain spirits who, in another religion, they might call them gods or demons or something like that. But it's just, nature spirits, and you can pray to them. And a lot of the prayers are simply, please don't kill us. Those kind of things. And often you'll have people giving sacrifices of either milk or kumis, fermented mare's milk, also known as erik in Mongolian. So The spirits like spirits. That's why they're called spirits.
So when because I mean this is something you've been studying for a large chunk of your life. Do you have anything that's like your topic of conversation? Like when you get excited and you get to talk about this with people, you're like, oh, this is the coolest thing I know about this, you know? What would that be for you and Genghis Khan and the Mongols?
Well, usually when I start talking about the Mongols, most people leave. Unless I'm in the classroom. Then they don't have a choice. Let's see. The most exciting thing about the Mongols. Isn't it everything? I mean, really anything and everything.
I mean,
my specialty is the Mongol military. And that's what I generally get really excited about is talking about the Mongol military and just how freaking amazing it was. But usually,
what makes it amazing in your eyes, though?
Just how modern it was in terms of how it operated. They were operating on a level far beyond anyone else at the time, and really above many other armies until the modern era. I mean, in terms of their organization, of their strategic thinking, on a large scale. I mean, they had armies operating on multiple fronts. I mean, even today, like the United States military would be hard pressed to fight on two different fronts. And the Mongols were doing it on a regular basis, and they had kind of figured out how to manage that, the logistics of it, of the manpower and things like that. And the fact that they evolved over time. And so they were never, they had their base of horse archers and things like that, but they were not opposed to bringing in other types of troops if it worked. If it didn't work, we're not going to do that. But eventually they even make a navy. They start off as being very inept at siege warfare, but then they become very good at it. Same thing with the navy. They didn't have a navy, and suddenly they become quite good at it. Despite the failed invasion of Japan and Java, it wasn't necessarily because of their lack of naval skill. It was for other reasons, but they were continually changing how they do things, learning new skills, finding people who were talented at what they do and bring them in. The Mongols were all about talent. So they were constantly evolving and coming up with new strategies. Because one of the reasons why the Mongols were successful was because of steppe warfare. The nomads on the steppe had fought more or less the same way from the times of the Scythians, like, from Alexander the Great and Cyrus, the Persian ruler. A lot of the tactics never really changed a whole lot, but in order to defeat the nomads, Genghis Khan had to develop new ways of fighting other nomads. The nomads were among their most difficult opponents. So they had to evolve and come up with some new ideas and more or less revolutionize much of the warfare that the nomads used, which then allowed them to conquer every other nomad. So I just find it amazing how they were able to do this.
Where does or why is there the misconception that they used elephants in warfare when they didn't?
Yeah, they didn't really use elephants. They fought against elephants on multiple occasions.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think if there was any instance where they might have used elephants. There might have been a couple occasions where they used them to carry stuff in Southeast Asia, because the Mongols did invade Vietnam. They didn't conquer it. They eventually agreed on a peace treaty because the Vietnamese ruler decided it was better to send tribute to Kublai Khan than to keep the Mongols invading. The Mongols couldn't conquer it, but the Vietnamese couldn't keep the Mongols from attacking them unless they paid tribute. So it was basically a win-win situation for them. They both were able to say victory. But yeah, I can't think of any other time that the Mongols would have used elephants in warfare as, the same way they would have used horses.
So the Mongol army would have had to have been massive at at this point? By the time he's
over time.
How do you keep these people loyal? I mean, fear only works for so long. How would he have gone about keeping them loyal?
Well, many people, like when they're invading the Jin Empire, a lot of people start switching sides because, one, they don't like the current ruler. Two, everyone likes a winner, so you join the winning side. And three, sometimes they just saw better opportunities. Genghis Khan would promote a lot of people who were good at what they did, but they weren't necessarily nobles or, someone of importance. And early on, this was an issue. He had some relatives who got very upset with him because he did not, show respect to them and give them a larger share of the treasure or, the plunder. And eventually, they joined the losing side against him. But one of the things he did was basically the "thou shalt not plunder" commandment, where previously, because they didn't get a regular paycheck. So when you're in the middle of the fight, you see something nice, you better take it at that moment, or it might not be there later after the fight. However, if everyone stops and does that, then the enemy can counterattack. They'll shoot you in the back while you're bending over to, pick up that nice shiny object, and you'll lose the battle. So Genghis Khan said, nope, we're not going to plunder during the battle. We fight, we defeat the enemy, and afterwards we'll gather things up and we'll distribute it. And he was much more generous in that way than everything else. And then also he set up a system to make sure, like, the wives and the widows or orphan children from his warriors, if they die, their families are also taken care of. So he was quite generous in that way. He was a bit of a social revolutionary. And have you ever heard the phrase "to the right of Genghis Khan"?
No.
Sometimes that gets thrown around, but basically he was quite on the opposite of the spectrum. He was much more on the left-handed side of things, because his childhood was very rough. I mean, he was in dire poverty at various points from his life. He was in an aristocratic family, but then after his father is murdered, they go downhill, and then he slowly goes back up in status. And I think he learns a lot from that experience, and that kind of shapes his ideas on status and other matters of that.
That's a pretty solid glow up, going from poverty to the ruler of the known world at the time.
Yeah.
It also sounds like he created loyalty with loyalty.
He did. He was all about loyalty, but he did not like yes men. He was okay if someone would criticize him or say, no, that's a bad idea. And they had to take a lot of balls to say, no, Chinggis, that's not a good idea. But if you had a good reason, he would listen to. He might not be happy about it, but he was open to listening to that. And if you betrayed like your boss, if you betrayed your king and took him prisoner, he would also execute you. Now, if you were loyal to him in the end, to the enemy to the end, and then entered Genghis Khan's service, he had great respect for you. But, like, if you betrayed your boss, you could betray me. So why should I trust you?
Once a betrayal.
So they weren't killing everyone. They would actually accept others in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you rebelled, you're going to be destroyed. But if you submit, I mean, basically Mongol diplomacy and in the simplest form, Mongol diplomacy at the time was surrender or die. Whatever works for you works for us. If you surrender, you'll be treated great. You do have to pay taxes. You do have to send tribute. If we ask for you to supply troops, you need to supply troops or food. But as long as you don't cause trouble, we're not going to burn and pillage and things like that. That's not to
Yeah,
say it
why
never
destroy
happened.
an already established society if it's right there working and functioning already? You know?
Exactly.
Yeah, if it's productive, then you might as well keep benefiting from that production.
Yeah. And there were some individuals in the Mongol Empire who said, we should really just kill everyone named Tom, Dick, and Harry. And if we get rid of all these people, then we'll have more pasture land for our horses. And so there was a guy who actually went through and did the calculation on the taxes. Like, if you do that, you're losing this much money. And the ruler, Chinggis Khan's son, Ogedei, said, that's a good point. So let's not do that.
Well, this has been an extremely fascinating and enlightening conversation about it, and I learned a lot of things I never knew, which would probably be most of it, especially since there was a lot of misconceptions.
You still haven't learned how to pronounce a
Why don't you tell
Chinggis?
everybody? I was trying to make sure it didn't freeze on us. I was trying my best. But why don't you tell everybody where they can find your books and you online?
You can find my books definitely on Amazon or any other bookseller. Timothy May, and social. I'm Prof Timothy.May on Instagram, and to be honest, I don't know what my Facebook is anymore. I think my Twitter is also Prof Timothy.May, but I don't venture into Twitter land anymore. You could say I'm an ex-member.
Well played.
There you go. But
do they even call it a tweet anymore, or what is it? Like,
it's still a tweet.
Can you still call it a tweet?
I don't know.
I don't think I want to be Xing anyone. That just sounds very, very negative.
Right? Yeah.
It does. I social media. I'm trying to cut myself off from it a little bit, simply in part because I don't have time for it. I mean, my primary purposes for social media are for amusement, and too much.
It's a very toxic thing.
It is. I don't need that much negativity in my life.
Meanwhile, you can find the DTF podcast on Facebook, X, Instagram. No,
that's us building a brand. That's different. That's different.
But before we let you go, Kip's going to do a questionnaire with you that was made famous by Mr. Bernard Pivot and James Lipton.
Okay, great.
Okay. And they're short answer questions. If you want to take time and explain your answers, that's up to you, but it's not necessary. So we're just going to kind of go straight into it. What is your favorite word?
My favorite word. Can I have two?
You can have whatever you want.
Okay. My favorite English word is gingivitis.
Okay.
I don't know why. I just like the way it sounds.
Kind of rolls real nice.
It kind of rolls. It kind of sounds nice until you find out what it really is. And my other favorite word, it's a German word. It's Verschlimmbesserung. And it's a word that means basically you're trying to fix a problem, but you make it worse.
I'm very familiar with that concept.
Yeah, I can relate to it a lot too. So
I'm a big fan of Schadenfreude.
Are you making words up now?
No, Schadenfreude is a German term. It's
Schadenfreude.
Is it Schaden? No, Schadenfreude. Taking pleasure in other people's pain.
Okay.
Am I saying it wrong?
We're arguing over a moot point. Okay. Back to the questionnaire.
Okay.
What is your least favorite word?
My least favorite word is curate.
Okay.
It's gone from being a great word for like museums to I curated a playlist. No, you didn't. You just moved some songs over. You didn't make a freaking mixtape.
Yeah, and mixtapes used to be really hard work. I'm just going to say recording off the radio was never easy.
No, it was not.
Oh, God.
What sound or noise do you hate? Or, sorry, what sound or noise do you love? Let's do these
the purring of a cat.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Let's see. Noise that I hate. Do you remember the old sound of a modem on a computer?
Oh yeah.
That squawking sound. Oh God, I hated that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or a fax machine. Those are. I hate those.
Nothing. There was nothing worse than picking up the phone when somebody had. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
you rarely hear them now, but man, when you
I'm
do.
old enough to remember that. So
Yeah.
What profession other than your own would you love to attempt?
I would love to be a novelist. I want to follow the Beatles and be a paperback writer. That would have been great.
What profession other than your own would you never like to attempt?
I don't think I would want to be a professional athlete.
Okay.
I mean, I think it would be kind of fun, but at the same time, that's just a lot.
Puts you in the limelight quite a bit.
It does.
That you don't want to be.
And also knowing that at any moment, you tear an ACL and your career is over like that.
Yeah. Being a professor, you don't have to worry about that as much.
Not quite the same way, no.
All right. Creatively, what turns you on?
Basic anything that where I get a new idea or see certain connections between different things, whether I'm reading something or listening to something. And it doesn't just have to be about the Mongols, but just in general, something that, like, oh, wow. That just gets me thinking in a new way.
Okay. In the same vein, creatively, what turns you off?
Stupid people. And by that, I mean, not people who are not necessarily intellectually gifted, but people who refuse to think.
Ignorance.
Ignorance can be cured because ignorance is just a lack of knowledge, but stupidity is when you refuse to learn. You'd rather believe what you believe and not be open to new ideas, or even when there's facts in front of you.
Fair enough.
And you still say, nope.
Okay.
And
this is
you
one
say
of my...
it to me all the time, Kip, so you should know you can't think stupid.
No, you can't. I've been trying for years. This is one of my favorite questions here. What is your favorite curse word?
Fuckity fuck.
I love it.
I think we have a new contender for number one answer on that one.
Yes.
Oh,
All
thank
right.
you.
And the final question, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I didn't expect to see you here.
I love it.
I think you stole my line.
Yep.
Well, Mr.